Morning.
All
This is
right, here we go.
I'm here with David Gerrold, Jim Wright, and we are talking about badger
Very loud.
races.
No, no, no. We don't
No,
need
we're
no
not.
stinking badgers.
Okay,
That's right.
that is so cool. Well, I don't know how to say it, but there is so much happened in the world that myself, I want to go curl up in the bottom of my closet and get a warm blanket, a book on tape of wild cards, and maybe a doobie. Uh, just God, but here to help us make sense of all of that
Oh,
are
Oh,
the
sure, sure,
un-
yeah, you
sure.
picked
Thank
the
you.
wrong
Yeah,
guy. Yeah.
Makes sense
unusually
of this.
cheerful David Gerald and the exhausted Jim Wright.
Yeah.
So, what's up, guys?
Well, I'm still moving into Vermont, so I'm very mellow. I have not had the news on except very briefly, and we don't have any televisions connected yet. If I get news, it's off the internet, and it's like, oh God, I don't think I want to read any more of this. And I go back to looking at pictures of nature and Jim Wright's pictures of birds, and it's like I'm here to mellow out. I am here to retire. I am here to I'll still write, but I am here to stop stressing.
Yeah.
And so the little bit I have seen of the news this week, and then the commentaries, and then the reactions, and the whatever, it's like I thought I was leaving this crap behind. And and of course, I know Jim has a lot to say about where Congress is going. I know where I want Congress to go, but that's a whole other discussion.
I know where they could go too. Yeah. But
Flush.
yeah, I'm in case you didn't notice the background, I'm once again on the road. I'm broadcasting to you today from a wet, rainy cornfield in the middle of Michigan that smells like wet cows. And I'm in a charming little coffee shop. Great people. This is the one thing that I do look forward to when I come here is this little coffee shop in this little tiny town in the middle of nowhere. And these are great people, and they make some really great coffee. And they're kind enough to let me sit here in the back room, which is currently full of I think we're potting plants. They're moving stuff in from outside for the winter, and so I'm sitting amongst bags of potting soil and plants and racks of
I
coffee cups
told
and
us
that kind of thing.
about,
So
so you can see I'm living in an unfinished room. Our furniture doesn't arrive for another 4 days, so I don't have a
yeah,
frame. I've got a mattress, and I've got a
yeah,
lot of unpacked stuff because I don't have a dresser or any other furniture. So we're kind of in the same situation over here. It's like, what?
yeah.
Do you, but we're here, you know.
Yeah, we're here. We're online, and we're doing it. And I spent 16 hours in a car yesterday driving up to the middle of the United States. And I have to say at this point, I'm really sick and tired of Highway 65. And sorry, like I said, I'm in the middle of a greenhouse here, and so there's little bugs. But man, I am really tired of driving through Mike Pence territory. But
Oh,
and it's interesting.
recognize,
I drove the
you
entire
start to
length of
recognize the gas stations and the country stores. You've been
well,
there too
I
long.
will say this though. I drove the length of Indiana yesterday from one end to the other, right through the heartland of hardcore right wing America, cornfields, cows, and MAGA hats. And there wasn't a single Mike Pence sign anywhere. I mean, even Indiana can't stand that guy. I, I have to say this though. I admire. I guess in a way I admire his persistence because I mean, wow, dude, to carry on. I mean, the left don't like him, the right don't like him. I'm not sure his wife even likes him, and uh,
Well,
and that guy's going to be
he
he's going to
just
be one of the most widely
really,
hated people in the world. Everybody wants to hang that guy, and he's on Twitter every day, like he's the most beloved man in the world, and people are listening to him. You have to admire that kind
he
of
just
delusion.
dropped out of the presidential race. He was polling single digits. It's not my time. No, Mike, it'll never be
Yeah.
your time. You know?
You have to admire that kind of delusional old view, man. Wow. I don't know. Like, I always want to, I'd love to see some kind of technology that allowed you to see the world through other people's eyes, because looking through his eyes, it's got to be like puppies and roses and happiness, because God damn, everybody hates that guy. And he's out there every day. Like, people are listening to him, hey, you want to hear my opinion of Israel? No, Mike, nobody does. Nobody gives a shit. And, but he's, it doesn't seem to phase him. So that's, at least he's got that going for him. That and his charming, Aryan good looks, I guess. And, whatever, So I'm actually, speaking of good looks, I'm actually was looking at David's Facebook page where he came in with you sitting in the captain's chair there for the new Star Trek tour. That's got to be pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, November 17th to 19th.
Yeah.
We're not too far away. So I was running errands in Burlington yesterday, and I thought, well, as long as I'm, only a couple hours away, I'll drive over, and I will see it. It wasn't as long a drive, and it's amazing countryside, and it's like,
Yeah.
beautiful, beautiful. And surprised them they were just thinking about closing up for the day, and I surprised them. And so we talked about me coming in for the November event where Bill Shatner is supposed to be there. And
that'd be awesome.
yeah, and a couple other actors. I forget who all. From
looks like from what I can tell from the pictures, that looks like one hell of a set, man. Jesus, that looks like.
Let me tell you, I saw it when they first installed it, and it looked good. But what they've done is completed a lot of the details in ways that, because originally the sets were open so you could put the camera.
Right. Yeah.
Put the extra walls in so you're in the complete room.
Right.
And it's laid out exactly like at Paramount, and it's more accurate than we had at the original shootings. I mean, everything works.
It's so cool. When I flipped over, like I said, when the other day, I was driving yesterday. I stopped at a rest stop or something and checked, I check my online stuff whenever I get a second. And the first thing I open when I look at my phone, there's you and your smiling face, with the Vulcan salute from the captain's chair. God damn it, it looks awesome.
It's so much fun. And what they do, what Bill does is they can fit 35 people around the ring, and Bill sits in the captain's chair and holds a little hour-long seminar and then leads people on a tour of the set, sharing anecdotes. And when I'm there, we do a screening. The amazing thing is that forward view screen is actually the right size for a big screen TV, so it's live. And so what we do when I'm there is we show an episode that I wrote or I'm connected to, and I do a commentary on it for the fans. So if you're a dedicated fan of Star Trek, you're not just getting the set tour, you're getting, if you're there when an actor writer's there, you're getting a whole tour of the experience of Star Trek creation, not just the show. And they have just done a very, very. It's nice to talk about something other than politics for a minute.
It is, and that's what I said. I mean, obviously, we're going to have to go where we usually go, but let's talk about something that we all enjoy. I will tell you that one of my favorite things, from when I was younger, was that book, The Making of Star Trek, that you wrote way back. Remember? Yeah, it had the pictures and stuff. And I mean, this was before the internet. This was before, the only way that you could ever find out about behind the scenes or any of that kind of stuff was from like fanzines or like Starlog magazine and that kind of stuff back in those days. And and then every once in a while there'd be these books, and the one that you wrote there, I still have that. I have the original copy. One of these days I got to get you to sign that. And the original making. You maybe buy a new one.
I thought I signed you a bunch of books last time I was in.
You did. I have them. Yeah. But the thing is, though, is I still have that original dog-eared copy of that thing that I wore out back in the day, reading through how it was made and the stuff behind the scenes. And of course, it had all those great pictures, from behind the scenes, stuff that you never saw if you just watched the show. And I think that's like the original of this.
Expected the show to become iconic, what it is today. And I could go on some length about how the original vision has evolved, and I'm not sure I agree with some of the evolutions, but the original vision was to do issue stories. And that to me, that's the importance of any science fiction exercise, whether it's film or television or a book or a story, is to push the boundaries. I had role models of Heinlein and Ellison and a few others, Fred Pohl, and to me, science fiction was about pushing the boundaries. Today, a lot of people think science fiction is a way to earn a living or just make money or be popular or have. It's like, okay, great, if that's what you want to do, but I'm over here, a child of dangerous visions.
Right. But well, you're also what I noticed, and people heard me. In fact, I just did some talk about this here not too long ago about the fact that I went and saw the first movie that I've seen in a theater since the beginning of COVID. And I went and saw The Creator, which it's not a great movie. It's for me. It starts out fantastic, beautiful vision. I mean, it's incredibly well realized. Plus, I'm an enormous fan of John David Washington, who is a fantastic actor. He was the guy that was in Tenet, if you're not familiar with that, and he's the lead in this. And then the second half kind of becomes formalistic, and it kind of does a Independence Day ending, but I enjoyed the movie. What I enjoyed about it, probably more than anything else, though, was the fact that it wasn't people in tights and capes. It wasn't Marvel or DC. It wasn't, forgive me, it wasn't Star Trek, and it wasn't Star Wars. It was somebody at least doing something different, which I enjoyed, because in the original days of Star Trek, of course, it was a huge risk, and and people forget how controversial a lot of those episodes, especially in the first and second season, were. Some of the topics that they were touching on were pretty. I mean, that the one with the Lazarus with the black and white characters, and
Yeah.
those were very, and like even Trouble with Triples, of course, because you're really, those things are all metaphors for the United States and the Soviet Union and those kind of things, and the cooperation between enemies, and all of
Well,
those kind of
Triples
things.
was an ecology story before anyone knew what
Right, sure,
ecology
and
was. Yeah.
right, and it's funny how that is a recurring theme with your work, because I mean, you're the guy that wrote the series on ecological terraform, or reverse terraforming, and but the thing is that those people nowadays, you look back at the original series of Trek, and when people make fun of I just saw a cartoon. I don't know where it was. Might even been on your page of the Enterprise with salt and pepper shakers as the warp nostrils. Right. And people, and we kind of look at it as kind of quaint, but people forget just how risky some of those episodes were. And this is one of the things that I see about sci-fi nowadays, is there's not a lot of risks. A lot of it is explosions and capes. Don't get me wrong; it's entertaining. And
Well,
and
yeah,
you
I
know,
will
I mean,
give you this. This is, I was at an early screening before it hit the theaters of Star Wars, and I knew instantly it was going to be a big hit, and it was going to be bad for science fiction as a genre,
right,
because it was going to be all about adventure and dogfights, and it wasn't.
mhm,
It was going to be about the the gingerbread, the technological gingerbread
right,
of science fiction, without being about the ideas underneath. And
right. And that's the thing. I mean, because like again, like you pick. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, Star Trek was always, as a TV series, was always about the issues, especially the
Right,
original series. The movies were imitations of Star Wars, as let's go blow something up, let's go fight a villain.
right,
But the episodic series had a chance to go to do what let's seek out new life, new civilizations, to boldly go where no one has gone before.
right,
New worlds. That's really the excitement of Star Trek for me, is what can we discover out there? And Gene Roddenberry said it best. He said, Star Trek is a way to say that the way things are is not the way they have to be. And
right.
he was, I mean, as a man, he was flawed. As a visionary, what he said, I'll give him
Right.
enormous credit.
Yeah. But the thing is that I don't know. I get some kind of error message here. No, I'm not going to reload the page. Go away. But well, again, again, some of the technology that was shown in the original series of Star Trek was incredibly innovative for the time. A lot of it was, take the transports, for example, which of course was picked so that you didn't have to show shuttlecraft every damn week. It was just an easy way. But the thing about it is you couldn't just throw that technology on the screen. there were endless episodes that explored the morality of it, the ethics of that kind of technology, the implications of how it affects civilization and society itself. And so and I think that's a big difference between Star Trek and Star Wars, for example, where Star Wars throws the technology on the screen, but never ever explores the implications of the ethics or morality or impact on society. And I think one of the examples, and I'm not the first person to do this because I've seen many other people talk about this, but you have sentient machines that are essentially slaves. That
Yeah.
it's just part of the fabric of the universe, and nobody ever says, "Is this moral?
And
Yeah, is
he
this
throws out
moral?"
R2, and it's like, whoa. I mean, that was as close to social commentary as George Lucas ever got in those films.
Yeah. There's no exploration of that. I mean, there's no exploration of the morality or the ethics or the ethical guidelines of people that can read your mind or manipulate you. These are not the droids you're looking for. Well, yeah, that's a great scene in the movie, but in reality, that's a hell of a power. How does that? And there's actually a scene that always stuck with me. I mean, it's very smoky in here. I think we're roasted coffee beans or something. Because wow, the place is on fire or something. But um, one of the scenes in there in one of the prequels is Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan are in some bar somewhere hunting some bad guy, and they slice this guy up at the bar, and the entire crowd is appalled. And Qui-Gon turns around, looks at the crowd, says, "Jedi business," and they're all like, "Oh, okay." and there's no like, "Hang on a minute, you guys are going to be off duty while we investigate this." I mean, there's no Jedi internal affairs department. There's no investigation. We just slice this guy up, left his body laying on the floor in the bar, and everybody's like, "Well, okay." This is the capital, and there's no exploration of the morality. It's just casual. This is the society these people live in. And I'm like, and you're nostalgic for the old Republic, huh? Where just space wizards could just slice up, and there's no nothing. I mean, and I think that's a huge difference between those two particular branches of sci-fi, is that you would never have had a scene like that in Trek without an exploration of the morality, at least in the first season or the first series, where it'd be less about the flashy lightsaber battles and more about the implications and the morality and the ethics and the impact on society of those kind of things. And and I think that's what's missing from a lot of the stuff that I read and I see nowadays. I like, not read, but a lot of the big entertainment, big flashy sci-fi things. And to give the creator its due, there definitely were, that entire movie is built around the morality and ethics of artificial intelligence and how it may impact society. Like I said, I think it fell short towards the end, but it's definitely I don't go to movies to have questions answered. I go to movies to be entertained and to have things, and it's always a pleasant bonus if the movie gives me something to think about. And the creator certainly did that. I want to watch it again. It was I enjoyed it. I thought it was well worth the money. I would have liked the ending to be a little less independent, a little less Roland Emmerich and a little bit more.
Well, let me suggest something here. Back in the golden age of science fiction, which is pretty much the 50s and well into the 60s, a lot of it we were seeing it for the first time. And what we're seeing now is science fiction being written and created by people who grew up reading science fiction that was written by people who grew up reading science fiction written by people who grew up reading science fiction. And they're rehashing a lot of the same ideas, and they're not pushing the boundaries or inventing new stuff or even new concepts. The way the field was so alive and sparkling and imaginative when science was discovering a lot of things that we'd never discovered before, black holes, for instance, and relativity was finally understandable to the average person when Heinlein wrote Time for the Stars. But nowadays, I see a lot of stuff being, sold as entertainment, as modern day pulp, which is not the kind of imagination you would get with Heinlein or Pohl or Kornbluth or Frank
Right.
Herbert. I mean,
But technically though, a lot of those guys, like every attempt to turn Heinlein into movies is an abysmal failure. And if anybody so much as brings up Starship Troopers, I swear to God, I'm going to turn this damn laptop off and throw it in the river because I despise that series.
oh,
But
we were at the first
but
screening of Starship Troopers. I took Sean, and he was like 11 or whatever. And I was ready to, when the film was over, I was ready to go stalk to the back of the room and strangle the director. And
light things on fire. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and Sean said, "Boy, that was one of the best movies I've ever seen." Well, through an 11-year-old eyes.
Sure,
Okay. So I said, "So I will
he
not
was.
say him here. I will." But
Right, right.
but it's a
And
dreadful movie because they missed the entire point of what Heinlein was talking about.
right,
Verhoeven wanted to make an anti-fascist movie and grabbed this book without any
right,
understanding of what it was about. And in
right.
fact,
And
they all thought it was anti-fascist, and it's not.
right. Well, and like I said, the whole, again, those are incredibly 90% of that book, not 90%, but a significant fraction of that book takes place in the actor's head, and that's again one of the reasons it was so hard to turn Herbert into a decent movie, and the initial attempts at Dune were so bad because that book is very much takes place inside the actor's head, and that's something really difficult to put onto the screen. Though I think this last, I'm looking forward to seeing the second half of the Villeneuve film, the one that's currently
I haven't
really
seen
out.
the
I
first.
think they've done an extreme. I
first-
thought they did an extremely good job with that, and so I'm excited to see the rest of it. There's a one coming out I think in December called Rebel Moon that I'm sort of excited about, again because it looks fantastic, but it also looks like something that's not the usual. And it'll probably turn out to be the usual, but it'll be interesting to see some of this stuff. But again, this is one of the reasons that I enjoyed Tenet. Tenet's a fantastic film. I've probably seen it a dozen times, and every time I watch it, I see something else that I didn't see before. And it's an amazingly convoluted film, and the acting in it is just unbelievably good. And but it's not a film for everybody. It wasn't particularly popular. It's difficult to understand. There's plenty
You
of
want a
action in
film
it.
that is difficult to understand? Asteroid City. It's
Yeah,
large
yeah,
movie.
that's good.
But
One of my
it's a brilliant movie. It's just it just seems disjointed and scatterbrained, and nothing
right,
seems to make sense, and some of the continuity doesn't seem to work, and that's the
yeah,
point.
yeah. Well,
So
one of my favorites is one of my favorites in recent years, and again, an abysmal failure in the theater, though I think it's gained some following on video, is Cloud Atlas. And
yeah,
I think, and I've seen Cloud Atlas. I've probably seen Cloud Atlas close to 100 times, and every time I see it, I see something I didn't see before. And I would watch the movie just for that 2-minute stretch of Tom Hanks in the middle playing this East End London brawler with that horrible East End accent that he does, tequila, couple of ficas, and when he throws the book critic out the window. I would watch the movie just for that scene. But I love Cloud Atlas, and it's an incredibly complex movie. But again, it's not a movie for people that think that DC comic movies or Marvel comic movies are the height of entertainment. And again, I'm not running that down. If you enjoy those things, then
no,
enjoy them. By
look,
all means, goddamn, get to go out and enjoy them. I'm not running them down.
sometimes
Don't
you
get me
just
wrong.
go to the movies. Sometimes you just go to the
Yeah.
movies to give your mind a rest because
There are days.
yeah. I mean, there are
I admit
times
there are days.
your,
There are
your,
days that I just want to go to a movie and watch people blow shit up. So
your mind, the human mind needs about 40% of
right.
recharge time, where you're not creating, you're not working, you're mellowing out. And if you don't get it, you go into a kind of internal meltdown and emotional, stressful, whatever. We realized this when we got out of LA, how much time we were spending being stressed and upset. And
Right.
like, I do have to say this. If I had to go somewhere in LA, it was a 40-minute drive, even if it was only 3 miles away because of the stoplights, the traffic, the idiots, the gridlock, the road work. Now, if I want to go somewhere here in Vermont, it's 40 minutes away through some
But
of
it's a
the
great drive.
countryside, no traffic, no stoplights, no billboards, no shops, nobody demand, and I'm having a great time. It's still
Right.
40 minutes, but I'm not arriving going there and back, arriving stressed. I'm saying, oh, here's a back road I've never been on. I'll take that road and see what's down there. It's like, whereas with LA, it's like, oh God, I'll take that road because it'll get me around the traffic.
Yeah,
It's
and that's and that's a hell of a segue into really, you know, the things that people expect us to talk about. And I will say to you that that's a hell of an analogy for the world that we're living in right now, because 90% of social media and the news and the media that we're looking at every day is LA. It's LA traffic. It is stress and anger and rage, and the entire, not just the nation, but the world has become addicted to being outraged about everything all the goddamn time. And a perfect example, and something that
it's
you know a lot
called
of people
doom
are.
scrolling. It's called doom
Yeah,
scrolling.
doom scrolling, yeah, and people, and you look for it because you need that. You can't just look at the news and say, "Oh, great, you know, here's an article on puppies or something." It's we're looking for puppies being murdered or whatever, and of course nowadays too, everybody has to react. There has to be a reaction. Everybody is their own show now. I mean, we're all on social media. Everybody is their own show.
And they're
Everything is
boring. I
clicks
gotta
and likes.
It's
Well,
like
and news. I mean, you look at
no, let me
news
say
media.
this. Let me say this. You log on to something that you really want to find out about, and the guy starts off by, you got to subscribe, and then he talks about his sponsor, and then he talks about something else, and there's a long lead in about how I discovered this, and then he says, but the thing I will get to that later. First, I want to tell you about this, and I want to reach through the screen and punch them because it's like
Yeah.
I was raised that you in to write news stories. As I trained in
Mhm.
journalism, you start with the most important thing and then you work your way down. And then for dramatic effect, when you write drama, you do a hook and then you interest people. You keep them interested as you keep writing, which you understand too. And it's like, and so many of these people who are putting stuff up on YouTube and TikTok and where it's like, oh my God, you people are wasting my time. Cut to the chase already.
Right. You know, and again, but like I said, everybody is the star of their own show nowadays with social media. I mean, I see this with people writing. You know, I was thinking the other day, you know, how much social media has changed. I mean, I remember like the early days of Twitter when it was, you know, people posting pictures of their lunch and it was a drama. You know, today we found this great taco at this place. You know, and you don't see very little of that on social media nowadays. In certain places, I mean, one of the people that I follow on Instagram, who I dearly love, is Ann Wheaton. Will and Ann Wheaton. But
Oh, they are so great.
I love Ann because
you got to meet them in person. They are just so much.
Right, and I love Ann because all she does is, you know, she posts pictures of them at hockey games and out with her friends and doing like, and she says, you know, I mean, the woman is a master of biting sarcasm when she needs to be. But
She's
I
brilliant.
can look at,
Very
but I
smart.
can look at her, feed. Or another one is an actress named Juliana Deaver, who travels the world, and she's an amazing photographer. She takes pictures of things that I would never, as a photographer myself, that I would never think of. And she's down some back alley in some, you know, Romania or something, taking pictures of children or something. And she's just a phenomenal, but the woman is just, she's out looking for beauty in the world, in a world where we don't look for those things anymore. And so those are the feeds that I go to when I'm sick of the goddamn world. And you know, I go and I look at Ann and I look at Juliana Deaver and I look at the pictures that they're taking and realize that, you know, we're still alive. And that's one of the reasons that I post the pictures that I do, where I post pictures of birds and wildlife and those kind of things, because I think the world needs that. I think you need to be reminded of it. We are outraged 24 hours a day nowadays about every goddamn thing. And so when you actually come to things that are worthy of actual, true, sincere outrage, the murder of civilians and slaughter of innocent people, it's lost. There's no difference between the slaughter of innocents by terrorists in the Middle East and the fact that, you know, Publix is out of your favorite fucking garlic bread nowadays, because it's just 100% rage all the time. People, you know, I mean, my God, the difference between things that you should be legitimately outraged about and the things.
You know, when I was a kid, I thought adults would act like adults. That adults
Yeah,
Like,
right.
the greatest disappointment in my life is discovering that most adults do not know how to adult. It's like,
Well, and again, and you see me talking about this. You're exactly right. You're 100% right. What you said is something that I see every day. I sit on I'm sitting on these social media feeds, and I see people that are my age. I'm in my 60s, and I see people that are my age, grown ass adults that are just nasty, snipey, petulant little passive aggressive dickheads to each other online. And I'm like, that is the kind of shit that you should have grown out of when you were 14. And nowadays our society drives that, because the more of a jerk you are, the more clicks and the likes and the more views and things that you get, the more reward that you don't get rewarded in our society for being a decent human being. And
yeah,
it's
it's like,
astounding.
one of the, I did a lot of courses, a lot of trainings. Ted Sturgeon dragged
Right.
me and
Yeah.
my boyfriend off to the S training, and while Ted dropped out and didn't continue, we did, because we were fascinated by the fact that the organization was focused on the distinctions of connection and relationship and communication and effectiveness. And while you can fault the organization for this and that and the other thing, we learned a lot about being effective in our lives. And I realized as I came away years later, having gone through the entire program, and it's not a cult, as you can walk away anytime. But I realized, although there were some cult-like behaviors, but I realized in looking around how many people surrounding us didn't know how to communicate, but they thought they could because they knew how to speak. They didn't know how to write, but they thought they could because they had a keyboard. They didn't know how to have a relationship, but they thought they did because they had gotten married. They didn't know how to be effective in their own lives because they were functioning at a level of unconsciousness. And to really be conscious in your life, you have to do that self-examination, self-awareness of what am I doing and what result is it producing and how do I get where I want to go. And I will tell you, it's a daily thing. You don't get there and you're there. There's no there. It is every
Right.
day you have to ask yourself, where am I? Where do I want to go? How do I get there? And sometimes it's just little things like how do we want to move to Vermont? So
Right.
we have
Was somebody bringing you coffee? Somebody needs to bring me coffee. But it's funny you should say that, because again, we're looking at a metaphor, as David was talking about. How do you get where you're going? I see this all the time, and it might, for me, it might be military training and background, because of course we had to accomplish certain missions. So you had to ask those questions all the time. How do we get, the powers that be, whoever they are, the elected officials of the country, establish certain goals, and we as the military have to achieve those goals. How do we do that? And so I'm used to thinking that way, but we see that again right now with politics in America, where you have people, whatever side they're on, saying this is the world that we want to live in. Well, how do you get from where you're at to where you want to be? And my brother and I were actually talking about this morning over coffee and breakfast, and you have multiple political parties in our country that are busy screaming at each other. Nobody's listening. And you have things like, there are things that we should all be able to agree on as a country. Hey, we would love to have all the conveniences that we currently have, if not more. And we want to be able to drive our big trucks, but we also want gas to be, cheap. And those things are not mutually compatible. They don't work that way. But it is possible that technology will allow us to have that convenience and have it inexpensively in things. Science fiction talks about post-scarcity society and that kind of thing. And it's also possible to do that without completely destroying the planet or disenfranchising people. I didn't say it was easy. I said it's possible to do that.
We're in a unique point in history where, for the first time in history, the human race has the tools to learn and understand the challenges facing us as a species. And for the first time in history, we actually have the tools to do something about it. What's missing is the will, the political will.
The will and the will and like you said, the plan. How do we get from where we are to where we want to be? Well, the first question is, of course, where do we want to be? And so when you say things like, hey, wouldn't it be great if we had the conveniences that we wanted, and the freedom and the mobility to do those certain things? And then immediately the conversation devolves into argument of one side screaming, how dare you, you're a bunch of communists because you want electric vehicles and you don't want gasoline, which is, and I mean, I don't know how the hell you get that argument. You people screaming about, fossil fuels are great. What the fuck difference does it make what the source of energy is, as long as the end result is the energy? And when I say what does the difference mean? I mean, obviously, if you can have a high energy society without destroying the environment and disenfranchising people and that sort of thing, which we're on the cusp technologically, we're on the cusp of being able to provide those sort of things. But you get that argument, and then you get the argument on the other side of it of, well, you keep talking about electric cars. We shouldn't have any cars at all anyway. Everybody should do public transportation, and then nobody's listening to anybody. Nobody's talking, and everybody's got their own agenda, and there is absolutely, you can't even establish where we're going, let alone how the hell to get there. And here we are.
Yeah, way back in the 60s and the 70s, when the whole concept of ecology finally penetrated public consciousness, guys like Jerry Pournelle would walk around saying, "Let them freeze in the dark if they don't want coal."
Right. That's my experience with Jerry as well.
Eventually came around to understand that climate change was real. And we needed to stop. And Larry Niven, bless his heart, I love Larry Niven. He would say, what we are doing now is a process that took 100 million years, we are reversing in 100 years. In other words, burning all that coal and oil. And that's going to have ecological consequences. And Larry understands science, I think, better than almost anybody in the field.
Right. But Larry's not great at communicating that, though. He's kind of an odd dog. I love him. He's fun. He's fun to talk to, but his brain works very fast and very differently from other people, which is probably why he was such an amazing writer.
It's why he's such a remarkable writer.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's one of the things. And it was funny, we were originally talking about original Star Trek versus where things went. And as you were talking about that, I was literally thinking about those original stories that Larry wrote. He was so good at those, the original stuff that he sold about the black hole, the Beowulf Schaefer stories, where he would take something like a neutron star and explore not only the physics of it, but the social implications. I mean, this is a guy that added ubiquitous teleportation and built his entire societies around it. But he spent entire novels exploring the impact of that. And though people have long forgotten those stories or maybe never read them, we still use the terms that he invented, like flash mob. That comes from Larry Niven, and it comes from the Permanent Floating Riot Club in some of his stories. And now I would imagine that 95% of the planet, of course, hasn't read any of that stuff nowadays, but those words have become a fabric of our modern society, and that's the impact that Larry had. I mean, that's the kind of visionary that he was, and the way that he explored social fabric and the impact of not just technology, but how we approach it on society as a whole. And some of the things that he explored didn't pan out, organ donation and that kind of thing. But like I said, we don't obviously have teleportation, but we have something that's pretty close to it, which is instantaneous communication, which allows for things like flash mobs. And so we didn't get the benefits of the technology that Larry predicted, but we did get the bane. And so, it's those are the kinds of things that I find fascinating, and those are the things that we try to explore in our various stories. And so, I find that kind of interesting. These things, we've gone around in circles here. These things all keep tying back to each other, around and around. And again, I see it in Congress, where you have people that literally don't believe in government running your government. There can't be any good end to that. there's no way.
I can't understand what those people think they're doing. I honestly, hello, who are you? Why are you there? It's like, and there's a meme that floats around comparing the educational history of several Democrats to the educational history of, I think it's Lauren Boebert, which is she failed her GED twice.
Twice, yeah.
Twice. It's like, that's not the kind of person you want representing yourself in the highest walls of Congress.
Right. and again, and whenever I've said that out loud, and as soon as I do that, and I'm watching the comments scroll past there, and we do read everything that you guys send. I just don't always respond to it, but whenever I say something like that, then immediately, of course, I get 500 messages from liberals who are all mad about the fact that I badmouth GEDs. I'm not badmouthing GED, but I will say to you exactly what David just said, which is running the government of the United States of America, which is arguably one of the most complex social, political, geographic entities that has ever existed in the history of the human race, facing the enormously complex problems that we are facing right now. I'm not sure that Lauren Boebert's GED is the best qualification for that, is what I'm saying. Okay. And again, I know people that failed out of school and eventually went back and got a GED and then went on and got college degrees and became amazingly well educated and rational people. She's not one of them.
Well, let me give you.
She's not one of them. All right. And
Let me
so there's a huge difference between that. Yeah.
I have a niece who dropped out of high school, but she went back and got her GED, and she is one of the most intelligent and capable women I know. Sean dropped out of high school. He came to me one day and said, all they're doing is warehousing us. I'm not learning anything. Can I drop out? And I said, okay, but it's up to you to continue your education, because I'm not going to force him to be unhappy. So he has used the internet to educate himself on so many different things. And not just the physical things, on morality as well. And he is one of now there's a couple things where he's gone off in directions that I don't understand or don't agree with, but 90% of what he has taught himself, I stand in awe of my son's ability to research and learn.
Right. But again, it's personal. It's everything. On the other hand, if your choices are, again, I often go back to things like airline pilots. I mean, you're getting on a 747 or a 707 or 707. Jesus Christ, date yourself there, Jim. But you're getting on a 767 and you're going to fly across the ocean. The guy in the cockpit better have some formal fucking training and flying aircraft, and not be somebody that learned how to do it from playing flight simulator in his closet. And again, there are things that require professional training. And I see this all the time. I mean, everybody right now, in the last week, Israel and Palestine and this conflict, suddenly everybody on the internet is an intelligence expert. I mean, when that hospital got bombed, literally everybody on the internet was suddenly an expert in battle damage assessment. And, if you listen to this tape, you can clearly hear this type of helicopter, but I recognize it from the blades, and, drop it. I'm like, for God's sake, man. If I actually heard when I was working in intelligence, if I actually heard an intelligence analyst speaking like that in those kind of certainties, that would be the guy you put out the back door, because there are no certainties in those kind of things. And within the first 24 hours of that event happening, as more data was acquired, as more information, and again, there's certainly now you still also have entities that are actively involved in setting the narrative and placing blame. And so whatever factual information you have, which that narrative and those facts are controlled by people with specific agendas, it's now being massaged through political agencies. And so when people say to me, well, who do you trust? I don't trust anybody. And again, you have to be careful with that, because then you become the guy that doesn't trust anybody. But again,
I can understand
these are incredibly complex situations.
The government learned a very important lesson during Vietnam. In Vietnam, there were a lot of journalists over there, and they were sending home their pictures. And every night, you'd sit down to dinner, and there would be war pictures. So now, stuff that comes out of any war zone is controlled by the Army, the Navy.
Right.
You don't see the horror. So we don't get an anti-war movement the same way we did in the 60s and 70s.
Right. That is a very good observation, because in the 60s, I mean, the one of the words that you heard that you'd never heard before that became ubiquitous during the 60s was body count. And the three news agencies that were on your TV during dinner every night would give you the body count. And the answer was, but we've killed so many of the enemy. And it wasn't whether that was a good thing or a bad thing. It was just assumed the higher that number, the better it was. What you never got, this is the difference. I'll give you an example. If you're actually doing actual intelligence work and you're analyzing a particular situation, you're analyzing the effectiveness of your particular tactics and strategy on the adversary, there's a difference between what's called BDA, or battle damage assessment. Sometimes the older term for it is bomb damage assessment. That's the Vietnam era. Nowadays it's referred to as battle damage assessment, and measure of effect. And the difference is that battle damage assessment is if you drop the bomb hit the target and exploded, all right? Measure of effect is whether or not hitting that target actually achieved the goal. And so, for example, let's say you saw a communications facility, or what you assumed to be a communications facility, that was what your intelligence people assumed was the heart of the adversary's infrastructure. And so you decide to drop a bomb on it. So you launch a Tomahawk from a ship out at sea, and the Tomahawk strikes the target and destroys it. That analysis of how the missile worked and its effectiveness in destroying the target, that's BDA. Missile struck the target. Measure of effect is whether or not you actually achieve your goal of impacting the adversary's infrastructure, because if that maybe wasn't the heart of the adversary's communications infrastructure, or for example, they had backups that you didn't know about, sure, you hit the target, but you had no effect on the adversary's ability to wage war. That's the difference between BDA and MOE, or measure of effect. And these are the things that you see when people start talking about. That's how you can tell right away online whether or not you're dealing with somebody who actually knows what the hell they're talking about or not. Because when you see news analysts and they're experts on TV, they start talking about body count, how many enemy we killed. Well, or how many bombs that we dropped, or how many buildings that we blew up, or those kind of things. What you don't see a lot of those experts talking about is whether or not you actually achieved the goals that were the ultimate strategic or tactical goals. And you don't see, we killed so many enemies. Well, did that have any effect on the enemy's ability to wage war? Right now, you're seeing analysis. Every educated news guy, every expert they bring, gray-haired news guy they bring in, is telling you how many bombs the Israelis are dropping on Gaza. We're blowing this up, we're blowing that up. What you don't see is analysis of whether or not Hamas is actually reduced in its ability to carry out terrorism. And I'll give you an example of this. We spent 20 years dropping bombs on Iraqis and dropping bombs on the Taliban. And every day they told you how many, we blew this up, we took this, we destroyed this city, we engaged these people. But the truth of the matter is that terrorist organization, whether or not you call it the Taliban or ISIS or whatever the hell you're calling it nowadays, it's reinvented itself a dozen times. And all you've done is move the pieces around on the battlefield. And the adversary's ability to carry out acts of terrorism isn't reduced in any significant measure. And you can see that by looking at your fucking television set every day. And so that's the difference between BDA, dropping bombs on something, and an actual measure of effect. And this is the problem with euphemistic terms like the war on terrorism, because what nobody asked was, what do you mean by war on terrorism? How do you know you've won the war on terrorism, but there's no more terrorism? You couldn't even quantify whether or not you've reduced. You've reduced the ability of terrorists to carry out terrorism by 5%, 100%, 50%, because you have no way to measure any of that stuff, either qualitatively or quantitatively. But it sure looks good on the 6 o'clock news. And this is the same thing with political goals, where you say, make America great again. What does that mean? How do you measure it? What are you measuring it in reference to? What are the objectives? What are the goals? What are the measurables? Are we talking quantitatively or qualitatively? Great for who? None of those questions are ever answered. People just nod their head and put it on a fucking hat, and we're all happy to go. See, these are the issues that you see nowadays. And like I said, you can tell right away if you know what to look for when you watch the so-called experts on the news or on social media what they're talking about. Sure. I'll give you another example. The first month that Trump was in office, he dropped the mother of all bombs. And boy, we all thought that was great. The Moab, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, big bomb, big bang. But and the BDA, and that was amazing. I mean, you got a hell of an explosion. You flattened the shit out of the target. But the measure of effect was flat zero. It had no effect on the adversary's ability to wage war, terrorism, at all. Zero. You made a big bang. But the ultimate strategic goal, you weren't any closer to that in any fashion whatsoever. And that is 20 years of war waged by America on terrorism. And now we're watching Israel go down the same road.
Well, let me say this. The Israeli intelligence used to be considered one of the best in the world.
Oh, yeah.
The fact,
just even saying the word out loud put the fear of God in people.
But the fact that they missed the attacks by Hamas makes you wonder why. And it'll be years before we find out why they missed.
If you find out at all, and if you even come up, because again, here's the other side, and it's good that you brought that up, David, because again, that's something that I've talked about online myself too. And again, this is an incredibly sensitive topic. It doesn't matter how you talk about this. Somebody's going to send you hate mail one way or the other, accuse you of one thing or another. It's entirely possible that Israeli intelligence saw it coming, but they're not the ones that command the army.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing in the United States. And it doesn't even have to be a nefarious thing, because we had gone to the president as the intelligence community prior to 9/11 and said, we think something's going on. Well, what's going on? Well, we don't know, but it looks like they're planning something. Well, who's planning something? Well, we're not really sure. And so you see things happening, but you don't have actionable intelligence. You don't know where it is or when it is or what's happening. And by the time you figure it out, it's too late. The bombs are already fallen. And it's possible that something like that happened. It's also possible that they went to him and said, yeah, we're absolutely positive these guys are going to do this thing at this time. And the politicians looked at it and said, yeah, because it takes a lot of political will and it's a lot of risk to take action. And if you go ahead and bomb these people preemptively, then you have to prove to the world and the public that you were right. And the only way to do that is to give away methods and means which are highly classified. And it's a no-win situation. And so politicians are generally, especially in conservative societies, are very much risk adverse. And so you wind up in this closed loop of you can't take action until something happens. And so it's entirely possible. And I don't know. I'm not there. I'm not on the inside. I am simply telling you based on my own experience, some of the things that I saw from inside our own intelligence community of you could be right every day of the year and lose the war. You can win every battle and lose the war. And that's what happened to us. We spent 20 years bombing the crap out of people. We never lost a battle or nothing significant. I mean, we won every fucking engagement that we were involved in eventually. And we lost a war. We lost a peace. We're no closer to winning the war on terrorism than we were 20 years ago. There's no way to measure that. Made a lot of defense contractors a lot of money, though.
As you pointed out, you have to have a clear goal in mind, and the war on terrorism is not a clear goal.
There's no goal. There's no objectives. There's no measurables. There's no way to even tell if you're having any effect.
Because the thing is every time you go after one group of terrorists, you piss off enough people to create a whole new group of terrorists. So it's violence begets violence. That's the problem. So what Israel has done by attacking Gaza as severely is they are creating new generations of people who want to destroy Israel.
Right. And the problem with that is, and like I said, and I can see in the comments, I can see it happening already. Guys, we've already had these arguments, but you're absolutely right. And the problem is of course, is that, who started this, who did wrong to who first. And there's no way, you have to, again, this is the same thing. These are the same arguments that happened after 9/11, where there were literally people in the United States that said, well, we kind of deserved it because, we were diddling in this place or that, or we blew up this country, and it says it's kind of revenge for that. And yeah, maybe there's some legitimacy to those arguments, but there's no way in hell that you could ever have that conversation rationally without people screaming hate in your face and accusing you of being, traitors and whatever. And then there's the other side of it too. And as I said online, there's no matter who started what, no matter how far back that was, 1,000 years, 500 years, 50 years, whatever, no matter which side of the argument on, there is ultimately no justification for the slaughter of innocents. And once that happens, you're terrorists, and there's literally, you could maybe make that argument if Hamas came across the border and attacked military targets. Of course, they didn't attack military targets because those are hard targets, and attacking the Israeli military is basically suicide. So they attacked the people that they could attack. And once you've done that sort of thing, you're terrorists. You're monsters. There's no justification for that. And so now they will reap the whirlwind, for want of a better term. And that's exactly what happened after 9/11. The problem with that is that now, as you said, the people that are on the other side of that don't see it that way. They say it as, and Americans see it, and some of the world sees it as, you're bombing innocents. Well, I have a hard time with Americans saying things like that, simply because we just spent 20 years doing the same fucking thing. And if you don't think that we killed pregnant women and children, I got news for you, because we sure as hell did. When you start dropping bombs on cities, that's what happens. And there were plenty of stories about that. And again, I'm not. What I'm saying here is that what happens is these situations become so incredibly complex. They're so fraught with emotion. They are so fraught with history, and so fraught with politics that we create self-fulfilling destinies of. Again, we did this again, and I hate talking about Israel and Palestine, because there's literally no position and nothing that you can, even saying the words. Just if you simply type those two words into the internet, you will receive hate mail. But as an example, as an American example for America, I mean, we were legitimately aggrieved. We were attacked on 9/11. Now, whether or not you're one of those people who thinks we had it coming, or those of you who are righteously outraged, I don't care. The bottom line is that we were attacked. Thousands of innocents were killed. And at that point, the entire world was behind us. Even our enemies publicly said, we stand with you. And we pushed that away in 20 years. We killed people who didn't deserve it. We attacked targets that didn't have it coming. We killed plenty of people that did deserve it. But again, these situations, they're not simple. They're not black and white. They're not easy. It's not that simple. And it's incredibly complicated. And we made thousands of mistakes. And as I wrote here a couple of weeks ago, I would hope that the Israelis learn from that. The odds are they won't, because we didn't. And so now you're in a position where, and I think what grieves me more than anything else is that, right, wrong, whatever, nobody, especially in America, cares. And when I say nobody, just don't write to me, okay? I'm using the generic America here, not you in particular. I'm sure you care. But it's just another opportunity for everybody to scream hate, to pick a side and to be outraged at everybody else. Whatever the hell, right or wrong, it's just another opportunity to prove your political point and hate somebody. And there, just like the war on terrorism and 20 years of war in America, nothing constructive, nothing good will come from it.
Yeah. As I have said multiple times, violence begets violence. One of the things in the study of communication, what you put out is what you're going to get back. If you put out negativity and hostility, that's what you're going to get back. And in fact, and I'll hark back to an event that most people here are familiar with. In 2015, a group of people declared war on the science fiction community. They decided they were going to disrupt it.
Oh, yeah.
Get hugs and kisses, and did they get welcome? No. What they wanted was to prove the hostility so they could play the victim in the martyr game.
Right.
That was their payoff. Look at how much they hate us. That's because
Right.
we're right. And that was their game. And so what did they get back? They got massive, massive hostility and negativity in return. They got smacked down. And of course, now they're still claiming victory. We disrupted their party. We ruined their party. So we
Right.
won. Well, yeah, they did win. They just ruined the party. They ruined the party 1 year.
Yeah.
But the party went on without them. The party kicked them out, and we're celebrating what apparently the Worldcon in China was very effective, very successful, and and nobody cares about that group of disruptors anymore. They selected themselves off the island.
See you later, Jamie. And sorry, I see Jamie Rodriguez, who's somebody I knew from Alaska, and it's always great to see his name pop up there. And so
Yeah.
I don't talk to him much anymore, but I see he's leaving the discussion. So, but it was good to see him, man. But yeah, you're absolutely correct, David. And unsurprisingly, once again, I agree with you.
It's just frightening, because you agree with me. We could both be wrong.
Well, it probably doesn't. It probably doesn't. Yeah, it could be, but we're going to enjoy it. But it could also be that I read a lot of David Gerrold growing up, and you may have shaped how I see some of the world.
Yeah, sure. Blame me.
But yeah, it's entirely your fault. But again, again, whatever, right, wrong, I don't know. At this point, I have a hard time. I have a hard time talking about how another country wages war, or another country faces terrorism or threats to their national security, when I'm an American and we spent my entire life making these mistakes. And so every time I sit down to start typing about this, all I can think of is I feel like a hypocrite. I was part of the military complex that invaded the wrong country. And again, we reacted in ways that that were right and wrong. Don't get me wrong. These things are not as clear cut as they seem. It's very easy 20 years later to point your finger at people and say, those sons of bitches, they lied to us and they did this and that and the other. And some of them did. Some of them were absolute sons of bitches, and that should have died in fucking prison instead of going on to write books and then dying in their bed. And if you hear the word Rumsfeld underneath my breath here, I hate that son of a bitch with everything that ever existed. But
McNamara.
Yeah, or McNamara, right? Exactly, right. And I love how history has kind of renovated his name. He's not as bad. That guy's anyway. We're getting to the end here, so I don't want to go down that rat hole. But again, my entire life has been this. And so when I see people come in and they say, well, I need you to absolutely condemn this person, or I need you to absolutely condemn that country or this organization. Look, I'll have absolutely no trouble condemning people that slaughter innocents. You want me to condemn Hezbollah and Hamas? You fucking ain't right. I absolutely condemn them. Fuck those people. But you want me to condemn the Palestinians? No. And they're not the same. They're not the same organization any more than the people who bombed us who flew airplanes in the building on 9/11 are all Muslims. You want me to condemn the Israelis? On one hand, there are things that they're doing that I think are wrong and have done wrong for a long time. But on the other hand, I have absolutely no problem understanding where they're coming from, because we were in the same place the day after 9/11 on 9/12. And so, look, people have a right to exist. They have a right to go to the goddamn store without getting blown up or their children killed. But when I say that, I can't help but immediately think in my head, I live in America where you can't go bowling without some fucking goofball with a AK-40 or with an AR-15 showing up to slaughter 15 goddamn people that were just enjoying a night in Maine. And You know what I'm saying? Again, perhaps it's an opportunity for us all to look at the world that we live in instead of looking at the world that we live in and using it to condemn everybody else. So, you see what I'm saying? It's more complicated than that. It's not as simple as you're right and he's wrong. But again, those are the kind of things that get me a shitload of hate mail and death threats every day. So, I don't say, here we are. I wish I had a snappy wrap up. I wish I had some pithy comment to,
Yeah, that's
so we could put on a T-shirt and but I don't.
I wrote it recently that there's a lot of people who have philosophies and isms and ideologies and theoretical ways that this should all, follow Jesus or whatever. And the truth is, what's really missing is empathy. Is if we don't have empathy for each other, we have we create our justifications for hurting each other, and that's. And believe me, I'm not an expert on empathy. I've spent a lifetime.
Right.
So
But
this is why I cherish it so much.
Right. I am and again, you and I have very similar outlooks in the world. It's just probably why I regard you as such a dear friend. But again, I look at the world and I look at the United States of America, where there are people that have just so much that they live in $500,000 houses and they drive $70,000 trucks and they smoke $400 worth of cigarettes a goddamn month and they eat more goddamn calories than half the world gets in their entire lives, and they have no charity for anybody. I mean, there are people living on a goddamn street in our country that we just don't give a fuck about, that we just don't care. We fuck them, let them die. We don't care.
Yeah, you just pretty much described my life. I mean, we moved to Vermont, right? We're living in a house that's kind of expensive.
Yeah.
We have a mortgage to prove it.
Yeah, so do I. Don't get me wrong. So do I.
And we had to get out of LA is we wanted the kids to have a safe place, and the area we were living in was having a serious problem with homelessness and with drug users, and we just said we cannot stay here anymore. Right.
And you as an individual, you as David Gerrold can't solve that problem. You can't solve the drug problem. You can't solve the homeless problem. It has to be we as America, and we as America just don't have the will. Everybody bitches about homelessness, but you can't. Pensacola is a perfect example. I mean, I live here. I'm in goddamn Michigan, but I live in the South, and there was a huge hurricane 20 years ago that devastated the city of Pensacola, and they got a bunch of federal money, and they went in and they renovated downtown, and downtown had always been a shithole for decades, since the end of the Civil War. And they booted all the homeless out and they gentrified downtown, and it's beautiful. Don't get me wrong, I love going down. There's great restaurants and it's all very New Orleans without New Orleans. And they booted all the homeless out. They didn't solve the homeless problem. They just made them somebody else's problem, and they moved up the goddamn hill. Well, now they destroyed another neighborhood.
One of my insights is that we never cleaned anything. We just moved the dirt around. And that's what we've done with human beings. Now in Los Angeles, I will give them credit. The new mayor of Los Angeles, I don't even remember her name because didn't care that much, but she has a plan which involves building homes and shelters and facilities to move the homeless into them, to give them a step up so that they can rehabilitate themselves, get jobs, and become functioning members of society. At least that is an attempt to address the problem rather than just move it around. Some of the counties of LA, their way of solving it was to move the homeless to LA. That asshole governor in Texas who doesn't want to deal with the immigrant problem, he puts his people on buses to New York and California and wherever. It's like, that's not cleaning anything up.
Right, you're just making somebody else's problem. But the answer to that is, well, it's our problem, so now it's your problem too. Well, okay, that's great, petulant 8th grader type mentality. But again, for example, I see every day, I'm sit here and look at the news screens, and Republicans keep yelling, we got to secure a border. Okay, well, maybe we'll take that as a starting point. Great, whatever, we can agree on that. Or not, whatever. But the bottom line is that it takes more than Ted Cruz yelling at Joe Biden that the border needs to be secured. My question is, Ted, where's your legislation? The president is limited in his ability to do things. You can take money. This is Trump, for example. When Trump wanted to build his wall, the legislature provided no money for that, and no plan, and no goddamn legislation, which is their job. So instead, Trump stole money from money that had already been legislated and allocated for schools for dependent children for military folks. He took money that was supposed to build schools for our military folks from their families and diverted to this wall. That's not a solution, okay? But even Trump was limited in his ability to do things. If you want a solution, then what it requires is that the folks that we elected to legislate, to actually sit the fuck down and legislate, and get off the goddamn internet, stop sending nasty tweets at each other, and actually sit down like grown adults in the Capitol and develop a plan and pass that legislation. And if they pass that legislation and it goes to the White House and the president vetoes it, well, yeah, absolutely. By all means, get on goddamn Twitter and yell at the guy. But you can't yell at the president about not having solutions if you're not doing your damn job. And Ted Cruz spends all stinking day on Twitter instead of actually doing anything. The guy literally has produced no legislation. The ones that are yelling a lot, and you see this right here in the House, we've elected a new speaker who is predictably exactly who we expected to get. And he's going to do nothing.
Yeah.
The people that are yelling the loudest about the problems that we face, homelessness, drugs, terrorism, the border, yada, yada, yada. I don't have to list it. We're out of time anyway. You will see, and I'll give you an example. I live in Matt Gaetz district. This is the loudest asshole in Congress. And he has produced two pieces of legislation, one to rename a post office and the other one for some fishing legislation in Navarre Beach, Florida. Other than that, he's done nothing. In fact, I don't think he's been in our district in 4 years. And yet this is a guy that every day is on Twitter, who sends out news bail, who's on the goddamn television, who's constantly beating the drum about how goddamn people aren't doing what the hell they're supposed to be doing, and has produced absolutely no solutions in any fashion whatsoever. He is legislator for clicks and likes, not somebody who's actually sitting down and doing a goddamn job. And these problems will not, I don't care who you elect, until you elect people that are willing to sit down, left, right, whatever, and figure out, and this goes right back to where David started us, which was, if you want to get from A to B, you got to have a goddamn plan and a methodology of getting there. Well, the people in this country that are responsible for getting us from A to B is Congress.
Yeah, I will underline that. Sean and I made a plan, and he took responsibility for one part of it. I took responsibility for another part of it, but we moved forward. And there were days when we thought we couldn't do it, but we had to rewrite our plan. But we kept pushing because we knew what the goal was. Our goal is, you're seeing it behind me, the house we now live in.
Right.
And that's the kind of thinking that this country had to get out of the Great Depression. It's the kind of thinking this country had to win our battles in World War II. And I have said to people, the reason why Eisenhower was a great general was he was good at logistics. And that's why he was a pretty good president, too. He was good at logistics. He understood what pieces had to be put into place in order to reach the goal. And I think that's one of the reasons why Sean and I were able to get here to Vermont, is because we knew what pieces had to be put in place. That's not what's happening in Congress. We have people who are in Congress to be congressmen. We had a guy living in the White House who he didn't want to solve problems. He just wanted to be king.
Clicks and likes. And again, and this is where we're at. This is 30 years of reality TV, and now we have a government of reality TV. You don't really care about those people living in the house. What you want is the drama. You want that woman covered in snot and tears and running makeup, yelling at that cat sitting at the end of the table.
You know what that is? That's Queen
That's
for
the
a Day.
entertainment.
Back in the early days of television, there was a show called Queen for a Day, and they'd have like four women. Each would tell their story about how awful their life was, and then the audience or whoever would vote, and the one who told the most horrific story would win the new refrigerator.
Win the story, yep. And again, it's Jerry Springer. It's that goddamn horrible court thing with Judge Judy or whatever the hell her name is. It's drama. It's all these horrible people that the more horrible they are. It is the fucking apprentice. I mean, and that's who we elected to be president of this country. And I saw somebody on there, Cheryl Alexander said there's a reporter interviewing voters in Gates District that think he's marvelous. Yeah, they're my neighbors. They're the people that I live amongst. They have signs, keep Gates fighting. And I asked my neighbors, fighting for what? He hasn't even been in a district in 4 years. He's done nothing for you. The one piece of legislation that actually benefited you is the Joe Biden's Build Back Better plan. Gates voted against it. Well, we don't care. He's fighting for us. He's not fighting for you. He's entertaining. He keeps you mad. He keeps you outraged. He generates clicks and likes. He generates drama and that's what he does. But the actual things that affect your life, and done shit. But they love the fact that he was tweeting from inside the skiff. And I can't tell you, somebody who spent my entire life with one of the highest level clearances in the country, how horrifying that particular episode was. But they love that. He's draining the swamp. And
you know why? Because by subscribing to that viewpoint, you don't have to think for yourself. You don't have to be responsible. Say, yeah, he's got it. Okay, I'm good. And it relieves the ability of caring.
Yeah, I'm looking at Rob's comment there about sounds like David and Jim could write a book about how people can come together, bypass the politicians and gridlock, and make positive change. Yeah, I don't think so. I don't know how to make these people come together. If I did, that's what I'd be doing. But
if I could,
hey, anyway, I got to get rolling here. I got to get down to the hospital.
Has been an issue for me is when I'm in bed with someone.
Hey, that's it. That's a whole different podcast, buddy.
Okay, guys, I think that's a good sign that I need to step in.
Oh no! Yeah, I actually have to. I've got to get down to the hospital and take care of some stuff. So
okay.
I'm gonna log out here.
And don't forget to send me an email about pictures.
Absolutely, yeah, no problem. I'll do that this afternoon sometime.
Thank you. All right, I got to run errands too. Thank you, Bob, and thank everybody who's tuned in.
And I will let you know that. Every one of them books I've been putting up on the screen has got one of these two gentlemen's work in it. I heard The Man Who Folded Himself was reasonably well accepted.
Seth MacFarlane said he liked it, so, you know.
Okay, so goodbye and thank you, and thank all of you people out there that tuned in so that these two guys can talk to each other and give us the pleasure of hearing.
All right, we'll see you guys later. Yeah, I got to go here, but thanks for coming and thanks for everybody. And it's always, it's always a highlight of my month is to sit here and shoot the shit with David, who's absolutely one of my favorite people in the universe. So, all right, we'll see you guys. Bye-bye.